and welcome to another episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and I am here with a fantastic guest. But before we get to him, you guys may have noticed I am back on the old camera again. So if you remember when I interviewed my dear friend Tatum, the lovely young lady with her first single out, we had actually recorded on video, but that was the day that I upgraded to Windows 10, and everything got screwed up on the connection for some reason. I have not been able to fix it. So back on the old camera. So I apologize for me being a little bit blurry, but my guest, however, is coming through crystal clear with great audio. Very excited to have him on the show. He is a songwriter, a performer, an author. We're going to get into all that stuff. We have a lot to talk about. And this is Byron Lee Scott. Byron, how you doing?
I am fantastic, Scott. I'm excited to be on your show. And, I'd like to say something real quick about your show. Oh. I've listened to a couple of episodes. And what I've discovered is that for a musician or a songwriter, this is a great thing to be listening to because you meet people who are like yourself, birds of a feather. And sometimes, as an artist, when you're around a lot of people just living, normal life, whatever, and they look at you like, wow, you're kind of like the black sheep sometimes. But when you hear other songwriters and musicians talking and telling their stories, wow, man. To me, this is the greatest entertainment, and I'm going to listen to more of your shows. And there's another one we did with Jimmy Hall at the Record Machine Show. Same thing, great format for musicians and songwriters and artists to listen to. So I just wanted to give you a thumbs up on the show and
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think it's great.
If I'm not mistaken, there is a link to that interview on your website, and I have the link to your website in the show notes, as well as where you can get the album and the single that we're going to talk about today, Without You. Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. I'm really glad you enjoyed the show. That means a lot to me. It's interesting as a musician, it's hard enough, but as an audio engineer, especially, you go to a party or a family get together, nobody wants to talk about gain and volumes and, panning and all that. So it's always nice to talk with my ilk, if you will.
Absolutely.
Congratulations.
And you learn some things.
Oh, you do.
Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate that.
Yeah. So the album is called I Come From Earth. And I just listened to the new single Without You, which, boy, this song really blew me away. It has it has a really interesting overtone to it, a little bit dark, almost 80s kind of dark, with the British New Wave Invasion synth feel to it. And in fact, the bass side of it reminded me a little bit of the feel of Take My Breath Away by Berlin, which I absolutely love the feel of that song. I got to see them perform it live, and it was brilliant. But the sound, there's something about that depth of low end and that kind of really punchy bass that really brings out an emotion and an element in a song that you don't really get any other way.
And that's a keyboard bass. On the album, we have 4 amazing bass players from around the world, and then I play a Fender bass on 2 tunes. And then there's only one song on the album, which is actually a 3-part tune called Spinning Around the Sun, where the synth bass survived once we started adding great bass players. But this one, it's unusual because on the album I did all the male vocals, and then there are 8 female vocalists that share the lead on most of the songs and do octaves above me and harmonies. And then on this song, this was a later release, the Without You, around Christmas time, December 16th. And it's an old track that I played everything on. And there wasn't any of that on the album. There was at least 1 or 2 people on every other track on the album with me. And we had dual drums on almost every song's part of our sound. But this one was, and there is electronics and different drummers on this tune. But, the keyboard bass on this, it came from, I'll tell you, and the other musicians might be interested. This was an old song that I had recorded long ago on an analog tape. And I had a keyboard called Emax that's sampler that had this one sound that I loved so much, and it's on about 5 different songs on the album that I salvaged the old tracks and built everything else around it. But on this particular one, the keyboard bass comes from the Emax, and this song, I'll tell you, everyone after the album came out, and the title track has been. We'll talk about that in a little while, but the title track's been on the charts in the UK and different places, and getting a lot of radio play and things for 4 months since it came out. And then around Christmas time, I was getting a lot of messages and things from people saying, "Do you have a Christmas song? We've got a Christmas show coming up." And I said, "No, I don't really have a Christmas song." And then this tune came to mind that, a couple of people that are close to me just recently broke up with their live-in partner of years, just recently. And I was thinking about how when I worked on cruise ships for 5 years, sometimes at Christmas time, you'd have people coming on that were grieving or broke up, and they're trying to find peace. And so the Christmas season can be kind of a lonely time for certain people. So I thought, let's do this. And then a really amazing thing happened, that with the album art for that picture, which is a beautiful blonde-haired lady sitting in front of a travel trailer with Christmas decorations and packages and a guitar, it was, and at the time, we'll get into this a little bit, but I was, during COVID, I was in a travel trailer. I couldn't travel, and it was living on solar power and recording a lot and mixing a lot of my parts on solar power in Arizona, not far from you, in Lake Havasu.
Oh yeah.
Some of the songs were, and then since we're on the subject, I came to Vegas to master the album at a place called The Hideout. And I was there all summer. I didn't know about you at that time. You're in Vegas, right?
Right. I wish I would have. We could have met up.
I just left there. I sold the travel trailer and my tow vehicle when everything was done, and we're promoting the album, and came to Thailand first because the flight was cheap one way. And then I come to Cambodia, and I'm going to go into Philippines and maybe some other places at some point. And that's another story. But I was in a travel trailer recording on solar power. I'd say 80% of my later tracks and mixing was done on solar power, out in the desert during COVID,
amazing,
or during part of it. But so then I found this artwork with this girl sitting in front of a travel trailer with a guitar. It was like my opposite or something. And I said, Christmas, and my drummer, Larry, we'll talk about him, Larry D. He's the other main member of this project. He plays drums on 80% of the songs. And we were talking about some old album, this guy that used to have a beautiful girl on every album cover. And it had nothing to do with the music or his band or anything. It was just his style. And I said, okay, let's look for a beautiful girl for this single artwork. Anyway, so Without You is it's a breakup song, but it has a positive message, which is about, it just wasn't meant to be. I'm happy that you're happy where you are, and thank you for the love that we shared, and I wish you joy. And it's kind of a healing song in that way, a way to look back at the past, and not with anger or regret, but to wish the person well and to be happy for them and to be thankful for the time that it made you what you are, and the love that you share with them. The love that you share with them is always going to be with you, part of you. And I'll tell you one more thing about this song that reminded me of, besides the people who've broken up recently, is that I've been in love a few times, and one person I was in love with, it wasn't meant to be like that, because I was going back to work on the ships. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a home base. I didn't have a lot of money, and I couldn't make any promises at the time. And so, but unfortunately, this woman had abandonment issues from her childhood. She had been shuffled around from one place to the next, and she didn't know how to say goodbye in a nice way. She always thought it had to be just horrible and crying and everything, and I had to teach her, thank you for the time together and sharing so many things. And I'm always going to be your friend if you ever need someone to turn to, and I wish you the best. And if you want to find somebody right now that's going to make that commitment, I'm not going to tie you down. You go see if you find that person. And if I know you years from now and I'm looking for somebody, maybe I'll think, hey, at that time. But anyway, she didn't know how to say goodbye. So the song Without You has a positive message, as well as that it's a breakup type of a song, and then that song, yeah, that was written long ago, really. And then I rewrote it a bit with this theme of just wasn't meant to be. Originally, I'll tell you something. This song, Without You, like you said when we were talking earlier, sometimes people interpret songs differently.
Right.
And when I first wrote this song, the lyrics were a little different, and it was really it was a spiritual ballad. It's kind of like it came from meditation, and it came from the idea of being separated from God. And I don't know all the answers in those areas. I'm not going to get philosophical and try to convince anybody of my point of view or anything like that.
Sure.
But at that time, that's where the song came from. It was a song of separation. And then Michael Stover, the guy who introduced us, my promotion partner, who we can talk about at some point, he sent me a thing that a film needed a movie about it. I love that wasn't meant to be. And that made me change the lyrics a bit. And then at the end, I'll just tell you some of my little influence on this. I thought about that song, I'm Not in Love by 10cc. And the vocals at the end that I added, the harmonies, came from that, just from that inspiration. And as you know, I think that, I once heard Louis Armstrong say that songwriters are always inspired by other songs. And that's definitely true, that it could be a feel, might be a lyric or an idea, it might be a sound. Like one of my main influences, I'll just throw in Jan Hammer, keyboard player, who you may be familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
He's been one of my influence for a long time. And I originally started learning by ear from when I was 4 years old. And I took some lessons, but then at one point I stopped the lessons and I just started learning songs, memorizing songs, playing rhythm and singing lead for the longest time. And then I started learning lead. And by learning other people's songs and seeing chord patterns and progressions and harmonies and so forth, that is how I learned music, by ear and by playing by feel. And then later, people like Jan Hammer, you see, expanded my understanding of chord structure and how chords fit together. And so his influence also influenced me for synthesizer sounds, because I was a guitar player most of my life. And then I started playing synthesizers back with the drummer, Larry Draglin, who is the other main guy in this project. We were in a band called the Hi-Fi Hippies back in Seattle, a 3-piece, and that's where I started playing guitar synth. So Jan Hammer was a big influence on that, and always along the way. And I guess I was just saying that sometimes we are influenced by other songwriters.
Oh, so, yeah. If you don't mind, I'll add that I had a friend gave me a great piece of advice one time. He said, there's a song in everything. He goes, the fact that you wear glasses, there's a song in that. The way that the breeze just blew through the tree, there's a song in that. It's more, I think, that we're influenceable because we're open to it. We pay attention to those things. We feel them, we see them, we take that in. And I think a lot of people would just look at that and they would notice that there's a breeze. And that would be the end of that. For us, we take that and we look at the way that the leaves are doing this, and we see a rhythm in that, or we hear a harmony, the way that the leaves on the top of the tree sound different from the bottom of the tree. And I think that we tend to seek that out, even subconsciously. But being
definitely.
But being an optimist, and I've been in love a lot, but being an optimist, maybe the reason that you two connected is because you were able to give her that lesson. Maybe that it wasn't about the romance or the future or anything. It was that she needed to learn that lesson, and you were somebody who could provide that. And that's why you came into each other's lives, because having been taught that now, having that experience, that makes everything else in her life easier, right? Because she doesn't have to go through that with somebody who would have made it a much worse situation than you did, because you understood.
So and sometimes it's not. And sometimes it's not always about you. Yeah. Like you said, it could have been about her. It's funny. Like people say, "Oh, look at the beautiful weather for our picnic today, just for us."
Right? Yeah. Exactly.
There's other people, right? Other people might be for them sometimes, right? Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned Jan Hammer. I have to say, definitely a very underrated player. I got to know him for the work he did with Neil Schon from Journey back in the 80s. They did a project together.
I love it.
I got some from him. I would say a lot more from like King Crimson, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Uriah Heep, and probably Genesis. I think for tones, just really seeing the difference in expanse and how people use different sounds for things. It's really amazing what's available to us. Do you ever just like pull up a different sound on a keyboard and just start playing around with it, and that develops a whole song?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, with my synthesizers, I play guitar synth now, and I'll just throw in for you guitar players out there. I use the Fishman Triple Play now, which is a wireless dongle in your computer. And so the software, just like when you get a new keyboard or even a floor-based guitar synthesizer, there's thousands plus sounds or a million, And at one point, I thought I'd go through them and pick out sounds that were my favorites. And I do that sometimes, But other times, I thought I was going to have to go through the whole library, which would take forever. But no, sometimes you just start searching, when you're doing a song, and it can take a different direction, because you're inspired by the sound. Or, you could even start. There's so many ways to write a song, right? You could start with a keyboard sound, and that could inspire you, or a beat. And I think sometimes with me, it's a feel, like you just hear a song it's got a nice groove to it. Just the tempo maybe, or how the drums are more, Right. And I really love drums. So, I think sound can inspire a song. Definitely. I'm really into lyrics, but go ahead.
Do you ever feel overwhelmed with the number of sounds that you have? Like I've got easily well over 1 million sounds, and there's no way I could know more than 100 of them. It gets to the point where it really does become overkill. When I got my first synthesizer, I was bound and determined I'm going to learn every sound. I'm going to know this board backwards and forward.
Right.
By the third piece of gear I got, that was the end of that. There's just no way you can retain all that information.
Impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible. Yeah. And so I always thought of the idea, though, of signature sounds, like, and I'm coming up with some of those in certain ones that cross over, like that Emax sound that's on maybe 4 or 5 tracks on the album. I'm not sure. And it sounds that you like, a little bit better than others. But it is overwhelming at times. The thought of it is more overwhelming. But I think once you start doing it, I just kind of got into a groove and a lot of confidence that, this is working, and just keep going with that, and so. But you're right. It is kind of overwhelming at times, the number of possibilities.
Sure. I mean, I guess if it feels good, stay with it. If you're losing it, change the sound, put in a different part, just keep the song moving.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm curious, you have so many people within the band, and, the singers seem fairly consistent on most of the songs, but how do you decide which bass player is going to play on it? How do you kind of arrange the players to really give everybody a shot?
Well, the way it started, for years, I've been writing songs for a long time. I have a couple hundred songs, several hundred songs probably, and about 100 on the old analog tapes that I'm glad didn't get released. Some of them, I kind of took the long way around. And see, what was your question again? How do you people? Arrange? Yeah, the people. Well, I used to do it all myself, and partly that was by necessity, because over the years, the bands that I was in that played original music, for some reason, it would break up, and we never were together long enough to make anything happen. And eventually I just got a drum machine and a bass and a keyboard and a microphone and a 4-track at first, and just started doing it all myself. And that carried on for a long, long time. But then, I guess it was summer before this last summer when it was released, my drummer friend, Larry Draglin, was in Colorado, and I went to his house and studio to pet sit and house sit, and I ended up staying for the summer, and we did drum tracks, and that was the start of Other People. And then once he just made an offhand comment on this song, Sophie and Pearl, on the album, and he said, all it needs now is a real bass guitar. And I thought, well, maybe so. And that was the beginning of it, because what happened was, and the bass guitar on that, she's on 3-track Ciara Moser. She has an amazing story. I wish I could tell everybody's story. but she was blind since birth. And then she started on violin, and then she fell in love with bass. And then she got, long story short, 2 scholarships to Berkeley and studied under all these people. And when I met her, and then the center, what was the first track? I think it might have been Sophie and Pearl. But anyway, she said, I don't need a chart. I'll just hear what it needs. And I said, okay, and her tracks, so she's on 3 tunes. Well, that led me to, I had synth bass on almost everything, or some jazz bass on songs that I played. And I just thought, this is maybe a weak spot in my song production, because when this new bass adds so much, the warmth and the low end and the technicality of it. And so then I found a couple of other bass players that are on the album. And like I said, I wish I could talk about everybody on the album. I'll just say that on the Harmony Dreamers is the name of the project, right? And it's everywhere just by searching for the name Harmony Dreamers, on social media, on every streaming platform. But the 2 main things right now that are happening, besides all the radio and the podcasts and everything, is our website and our YouTube channel. Because the website, you can see pictures of everybody and some stories about it. And then, as you mentioned earlier, we have an LP, vinyl and CDs and some merchandise and things like that. And the music is all on the website as well. And right now you could download it for free or stream it. And backstories within every song info tab on the website, and also on the backstories on the YouTube channel on every song description. But
I will say it's beautifully designed, by the way. The website looks fantastic. It's very well organized. That was the first thing that stood out to me, is I can see everything without having to search. It's just all very well laid out. So whoever your web designer is, great job.
Thank you. It's a real fun place, with the pictures and the descriptions and everything. It's a cool site. And then on YouTube, I really like YouTube a lot. I believe we're commercial free right now. So we have the full album playlist on there. And then the new song, one of them that's coming out, Pass It On from the album. We just made a video for that, a music video that's coming out now. In fact, it's on our YouTube. And the song Pass It On, I'll just say, since we're talking about that, I'll come back to that. Okay, the YouTube channel also has, I'm just telling people that the YouTube is a cool place to go. There's now a 25-part series on there that is full album. What's the word I'm looking for? Backstories. And so it's 12 songs and 12 interviews, and and then there's some other interviews on there, some lyric videos, and there's one other official video from our song Summertime Memory, which, by the way, it's now summer in the Southern Hemisphere officially. Happy summertime down there, guys. Yeah. And it's pretty warm here, although I'm in the Northern Hemisphere in Cambodia. But anyway, so so the YouTube channel and the website, harmonydreamers.com, there's really a lot of cool stuff there, is all I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, and I've got the link. I've got the link in the show notes. You guys should check it out. Definitely. I mean, even while you're listening to the interview, just go and start perusing the website. I love the idea of the behind the scenes and historical videos, because sometimes I want to know more about a song. Sometimes I hear it and I'm like, I really like that song. I want to know more. And we don't get that. As well, we're starting to get it now, because people are doing those I'm getting ready to do my series for my new album, but it's so much fun to be able to have that information now, instead of hoping it pops up in an interview somewhere.
Yeah. And an interesting thing for you musicians and YouTube people out there is that when I first did the interview with Jimmy at the Record Machine Show, it was 1 hour and 50 minutes, including the music, and 150. And it took forever to make the video and to upload it. And then YouTube said, no, you can't do that. We don't. And I researched and found out they don't allow a full album. They want you to split it up into tracks. And that took me a long time, but it was even better because the descriptions are now per song. So you don't have to listen to the whole 1 hour and 50 minutes. You can find any song description. And also at the same time, when I was splitting it up, I decided I want to put pictures and the names of everyone that was on every track when I'm talking about them on the descriptions. And so it came out really beautiful that there are eight female singers besides myself and Larry, and 4 bass players, and then some other people. I wish I could mention all of them on a number of instruments. And then on the title track, I Come From Earth, which has been doing real well for these last 4 months. There are 21 backup singers from every continent except Antarctica, which is under international treaty and has no permanent residence. So right. It's an international. It's actually a global concept. The album kind of turned into a global concept, partly because I was always inspired by positive lyrics, bands that sing about love and brotherhood and even stop the war, whatever, just let's get along, we're all connected. And so the album, I was always into good lyrics like that. And I chose the best songs. And then some of them are new that came sort of at the last minute, like I Come From Earth was one of the songs it took a few years in the making on that song, but it was a last minute tune as far as the album. And it just seemed like that's the title track, because that song is a global message, but with a sense of humor. Mm-hmm. And I try to have a song with a sense of humor once in a while. I was always inspired by people like Joe Walsh and Jerry Reed, mm-hmm. and other people, Frank Zappa. So many people have funny lyrics from the time I was a kid. And so that song has a sense of humor. And it seemed like the perfect sort of title track for a global album. And I'll also mention that the album is a concept album. And I also try to arrange it to listen from front to back, like we used to do back in the old days. If you ever have a party and, what we used to do, all those things, and, party with your friends and put an album on. Mm-hmm. And it's 12 tracks, but it's actually 17 songs. The other one of the main songs on the album, Spinning Round the Sun, has 3 parts, and part 1 and 2 are tied together on the first songs on the B side. And that's part 1 is the main radio version, and part 2 is a cinematic variation, and part 3 which is at the last song on the album, is an instrumental dance club version. Mm. And so that's. The first one is 2 tracks, and then there's a song called The First Song Suite, which has 5 parts. So it is kind of a concept album, I guess you would say. And I'll just mention real quick about the title track, I Come From Earth, which has been doing so well in so many places. Thank you. It's not it's not gangbusters like on the Billboard, but it's still on charts. It's been on these charts in the UK, like the iTunes chart, and this other one for talk radio for 4 months. And it's still in the top 10 right now. And so, but anyway, this song came from personal experience. It's called I Come From Earth. And what happened was, when I used to travel around, people would always ask 2 questions, as it says in the song. What's your name? Where are you from? And I started to saying Earth when they asked where I'm from. And I noticed that people, you laugh. People would laugh. Mm-hmm. And almost every time, except as it says in the bridge, there was one girl in a restaurant. She said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Earth." And she said, "Where is that?" And so that's in the bridge. And so the song came from personal experience, and that one took a few years to come together. And so it's a global message, but with a sense of humor and So the album, let's see what else. I mentioned my good friend Larry, who he also, besides playing drums, he's a guitar player and singer and very musical person. And he's also was a big technical advisor on the album. He used to run sound, owned a recording studio, very good ear. And sometimes it's funny, until the technical part of it sounds okay to him, he doesn't even hear the lyrics at first. It's kind of funny, but it was a great combination because he added so much to so many songs. It's just suggestions. And then as long as I mention Larry, one song called "No Stopping," which is a rock tune that's been getting a lot of play in different radio stations and things as well. That was kind of the beginning of our dual drum sounds. And what happened that summer, I was there recording with him. That was an old instrumental, and we put down 3 drum tracks from him playing. He just jammed. I told him, cut loose on this song, because Larry is, I'm telling you, technically he's one of the best drummers in the world. The things that he can do is amazing. And I said, you've been practicing all this stuff. Come on, let's let it go. And the song originally had a drum solo in it, which I did all the tracks in the beginning. And we were going to redo the whole thing. And then at one point I walked into his room. He was watching the Eric Clapton video with 3 drummers on stage. And I said, I want 4 drummers. And then, because I always like dual drummer sounds. And we said, hey, why don't we just keep both drum tracks on that song? And then we decided to split up and do dueling drum solos in the middle. And we were inspired by the song Frankenstein by Edgar Winter, right back in the old days.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was complaining about dividing up these drum solos, right? And on the computer. And he said, back when they did Frankenstein's song by Edgar Winter, they had tape, analog tape, and they had to cut it with a razor blade to edit, and they had it strung all over the room everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And so he said, so I said, well, maybe this isn't so bad on the computer, and anyway, that was the beginning of our dual drum sound. And we ended up keeping that with Larry's drums and electronic drums. And then later, after that summer, we didn't have the same studio setup for his drums. And there was a few songs, and he said, let's get another drummer. And so this guy, Graham Hopkins, who is a famous, amazing drummer, I found him, and he was in a movie called Once. If you haven't seen this music movie called Once, the music of Glenn Hansard and Markita Irglova, you really must see that as a songwriter. And anyway, I knew him from that. He's been on 46 albums that I know of, Snow Patrol, and he's from Ireland, and has played everywhere, Royal Albert Hall, you name it.
Wow.
And then, so I got him on this song Summertime Memory, which we have the other video of. And then he said, why don't you get my buddy Robbie Malone if you're looking for a bass player? And Robbie is with David Gray. He's been touring with David Gray for 20 years. And I said, yeah, let's get him. And Robbie's bass playing on that song Summertime Memory reminds me of the Beatles. It was amazing. He's only on one tune on the album, Robbie. And like I said, I wish I could name everybody, but pictures and names and so forth are on the website and on those YouTube descriptions. So, but anyway, that was the dual drum sounds.
If you ever get the chance, I had the pleasure a few years ago of seeing Edgar Winter live, and he opened for Alice Cooper and Deep Purple. And he played for maybe 20, 25 minutes. Amazing. He did some songs that were really good, but he ended, of course, with Frankenstein. And there is something about, there's always been something about listening to that song for me. It's a really interesting song. Even as a kid, that song really drew me in. But to see him perform it, there was a magic that was unprecedented for me to be in the presence of that song.
I can imagine, man. I can imagine. That guy. I'm a big fan, and I know I own several of their albums. Shock Treatment, it was one of my favorites, and he plays so many instruments, and the songwriting, the vocals, his songwriting is amazing.
Absolutely,
and I can't imagine getting to see him. That would be just fabulous.
Even just relaying that story to you, I still get a chill, down my spine, because it just the associated memory with it is so intense. Before we go, I wanted to ask you.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to mention, we talked about Michael Stover, the guy that introduced us at MTS Management and Promotions. And, he has some great programs for artists to help them promote and take a big load off of them. But on that song, No Stopping, is kind of funny. He really likes that song a lot. And he said to me, it reminds me of Stranglehold by Ted Nugent in a certain way. And I thought, oh my God, because when I was playing rhythm for years, I was with a great guitar player named Louis Tysinger when we were kids. He's in Chicago right now. And he inspired a lot of the chord structure and things back in that song. But the first song I ever learned to play lead was Stranglehold, and I learned it note for note. And I never got the association until Michael said, that reminds me of Stranglehold. And I thought, it's quite possible. There might be a little influence in there from Ted Nugent. I never thought of that. So anyway,
nothing wrong with that.
Yes. Okay. So Yeah. So that's the end of that story for that song.
No, that's great. And like I said, I've got the link to your website and the album and everything in the show notes, so people go check that out. I also want to ask you about your book. So your book is called Balance Your Choices, Life's Compact Guidebook to Happiness Your Way. That's a mouthful. Tell us a little bit about that. And I notice, of course, you're wearing the Om symbol on your shirt. It seems now I have not had a chance to look at the book yet, but it seems like something that really is what we need, because we're having such a hard time navigating the world these days, and all the changes, the pressures that people put on us, the expectations of society. How will this book help us?
Well, this book, it could help everybody, but unfortunately, not everybody's interested in doing that. It's really great for young people who are trying to decide what to do with their life, or people who have an empty nest syndrome. But yeah, just to be happy. And what short story is that when I was young, I learned about priorities from someone, which is taking all of your ideas, all of your choices, and deciding what's first, what's second, what's third, and do number one till it's finished. Okay. And so then I started thinking, well, instead of having one big priorities list for my life, what if I looked at different areas of life that people all share, like work, play, body, mind, and spirit, relationships, your own self-improvement and balance, money and possessions, your environments. And so I started having priorities in different areas of life. And not everybody is interested in every area of life. You don't have to be like perfect balance of all these things. You might be more interested in spirituality, or you might be more interested in going to the gym. It's up to you. But it's a way of looking at life and deciding what my priorities. And you might look at those different areas and say, well, what do I want to do next? And then it's just deciding what's important to you is part of what the book is about. It's really about time management in a way, because there's only so many hours in the day, unfortunately. But another thing it's about is just enjoying the journey along the way, and just enjoying life and being content. I like happiness as a word. I think everybody's looking for happiness in a way, but I also love the word contentment. It's kind of just a peaceful happiness. You don't have to be, yay, I'm so happy all the time.
Right. Yeah.
No, it's more like the Om, right? Ooh, Om, it's just peaceful. And contentment. I love the word contentment, and just accepting where you are along the way. And so but this book is 100 pages long. And the main meat of the book is in the first 40 pages. You can read it in an hour. And then the rest of it is sort of a reference of different areas of life, just kind of different points of view about it. And so I made it compact because people, they don't need to spend a lot of time, they don't have a lot of time. And so it's a short book. And yeah, I guess that's the story about the book. It came from personal experience, and that's kind of how I got where I am right now, by just deciding priorities and trying to keep the lists, in check. And right now I have routines, and I find routines are a lot about health related things, and then priorities that I'm working on, and then small stuff, little things you got to do that aren't really important. And so I keep organized, and I like writing things down. And that can also become overwhelming when you have too many projects, and that's why you have to decide priorities. But one nice thing about writing it down that my friend pointed out to me recently is that it helps you remember ideas, because when you're always coming up with ideas, you write them down and you remember. However, the list can get overwhelming, and you look at it and you go, oh my God, how am I going to do all this? Well, just remember, the lists are about helping you remember and to lessen your worry, and not to make you worry more about what you haven't done yet. So just be content along the way, take one step at a time, and decide what's important next. So that's what it's about, balance your choices. And it's on our website, on Amazon, electronic version, which you can read on any device now with the Kindle app. And then there's a soft cover on sale.
Do you plan on doing an audio version?
I do plan on doing audio version at some point. It's on the list.
Because I have found, because I used to love to just sit on the couch and take a day or a couple hours a day and read a book. It was one of my favorite pastimes. I told myself I can't just sit here and do music all the time. Like I've got to do something to, get away, refresh myself, sit in a different position. But as I got busier and busier, I found it wasn't important enough for me to make the time to do that, but I missed reading books. So audiobooks became a huge thing for me when I lived in Phoenix and I would drive to Vegas. It wasn't music, it was audiobooks.
Me too.
It's a whole different group of people that would be interested. So I'm glad that you're doing that.
Absolutely. I listened to 200 or 300. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
I listened to several hundred audio books, and I love the British speakers, especially on the older books. So yeah, I'm with you on that. And someone else suggested that. So yeah, it's on the list. And hey, one last thing I just wanted to mention that you're in Las Vegas.
Yes.
And the Hideout studio there where I did the mastering, man, I learned a lot from that guy. And I know you like audio engineering, and you're a musician as well, and a songwriter. And I learned a lot from that guy, Louis Pacheco, Louis the LP at the Hideout. Are you familiar with the Hideout studio in Vegas?
I've heard of it, but I've never been there.
Yeah, Louis is amazing as a mastering engineer, and he taught me about stems mastering for you musicians out there, where you do all of the mixing completely, either on an individual channel or on a group, and you have nothing on the master, and it never goes above -3 dB. So he has headroom to work with. So all your automation, your effects, your panning, everything is done on the stems. And then you take him a group of 6 or 8 or however many stems are on the track, and then he does the mastering. And wow, the technology these days is amazing that you can do that and keep your mix without putting anything on the master. And so
it's really the techniques that have been developed, especially in the last few years, I've noticed. I just started learning about top-down mixing. And as I'm getting into that a little bit more, I thought, wow, I kind of mix as I go. As I'm writing, I'll blend in instruments and then just put on some final polish when I do my mix. So the idea of just taking all the faders and zeroing them is so... I don't know that I'm quite ready for that, but it is interesting to see. I'm going to have to get over there and see if I can get some time with him, because I would love to see his perspective on how he does that.
And I use Ableton. What software are you using?
I've been using Cakewalk since 99, 98, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Yeah. I have Ableton. I've got Digital Performer. I've got a bunch of different ones that I've tried. But it's kind of like, anything else. The one that you started with, the one that you know the best and you can get in and out and do what you need to do, that's the one that tends to become your favorite.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Byron, for coming on the show. I'm so glad I got some time to talk to you. You are just bursting at the seams with love for this album, and I want people to check it out. So once again, folks, I know I've said it 50 times on this episode, but go check it out. It's great. The new single, Without You, is wonderful. I love the message of it because, yes, the holidays, especially as we've just come out of them, can be very cold for people who don't have that in their lives. And it's that the family warmth between the Christmas movies and just the general seeing people out shopping together and all that can really be, an arrow to your neck. So don't look at it that way, because it's different for everybody. And next year it could be completely different for you. But I definitely hope that you'll come back on the show again, because I'm sure we have a lot more ground we could cover in our conversation.
I would love to. And like I said, I'm going to be listening to your show for my maybe some more audio books, but I love hearing other artists' point of view. I'm learning from it already. Thank you.
This is episode.
It's great chatting with you.
Yeah, 290 or 291, I think. So there's plenty.
Wow.
There's plenty out there. I've got a ways to go yet. But,
wow.
But you can have a great time out in Cambodia. Enjoy. Be safe out there. And we'll chat again soon. But in the meantime, go check out the links in the show notes, people. Thanks for listening to another episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. Cheers.
Peace, everybody. Cheers. Thanks.